is what? Responsibility. That's what we're talking about. How to take responsibility for your actions, what you do, your potential, how you do it, and what you're going to do when you do it, right? Right? This whole thing is talking about releasing your potential. I think it's awesome that in this last chapter, the last thing you have to know is that you need to take responsibility. We've talked about how you can release it, what you can do when you released it, how to use it, where to use it, what to do, how to put in effort, but you can't do all these things unless you take responsibility for all of it, right? So you will never know the extent of your potential until you give it something to do. So the greatest tragedy in your life will be what? Not your death, but what dies with you if you die. What a shame it would be to waste what God gave you if you never take responsibility for the potential that you have. You will never know the extent of your potential until you give it something to do, right? So, have you ever noticed that the deep peace and contentment that come over you when you fulfill responsibility? Nothing is more rewarding or personally satisfying than the successful completion of an assigned task, right? When you are in charge of it, what happens? When you complete a task that you're trying to do, even if it's something small, like say for the day, you're like, you know what, I'm gonna just clean this for the day. You know how satisfying it is when you just go do that one thing, you get it done, and it looks nice, right? And you're like, whew, that actually looks great. Thank God, right? That's just how it is. When you are trying to complete a task, it is ultimately satisfying when you take responsibility for a task that you're trying to do and you get it finished, right? The joy and elation that fill you at such times are the fruit of achievement. The experience of fulfillment is directly related to this principle of finishing, right? Finishing. An old Chinese proverb says, the end of a thing is greater than its beginning. So in other words, finishing is more important than starting. The beginning of a task may bring a degree of anxiety and apprehension, but the completing of a task usually yields a sense of relief, joy, and fulfillment. Even if a task fails, I just wanted to throw this in here because it's not in the book. Even if your task that you're trying to accomplish does not work out in the end because you put in the effort, right? Even if it doesn't end up work out, or maybe the conclusion you wanted ends up not being the same, it does not mean that you still can't be satisfied, because with the fact that you took responsibility to do the task, and even if you messed up the task, that means you still took the time, right? There are plenty of times that I've done stuff and I realize, oh shoot, I messed up, but I realize I've still made progress. Progress was made because I took responsibility and I put in the work. I made progress. But I can't make progress unless I try and do it first and take responsibility to try and fulfill the thing that I want to do, right? You're not going to do everything perfectly. But even if you fail a couple times, just like Thomas Edison, he failed multiple times, but did he feel like he couldn't do it? No. He failed so many times to try and make the light bulb, right? But when he finally succeeded through all of that failure, and he made the progress, and then he did it, right? The accomplishment he must have felt was amazing. He was like, oh, thank the Lord. And he's like, I finally got through all of this. So no matter how many times you mess up in the situation or fail, you have to remember, failure does not mean you have officially failed. It just means progress. So, history is filled with the great starters who died unfinished. In fact, the majority of the 5 billion human beings who inhabit the earth will die unfinished. And there's a tragedy. What counts is not how much a person starts, but how much he or she finishes, right? Like I said, even in failure, if you finish, there's still going to be a sense of responsibility involved in that. The race is not to the swift, but to him that endures to the end. Remember the tortoise and the hare, the stupid, childish little story? As an adult, now you realize, if you read back in that story, the tortoise and the hare was impatient. He was so overconfident in his ability and did not even think about, or the lack of understanding of what was going on, right? He was going so fast, and he was like, man, you know what? I could take a break. I can stop putting in the work. It's not a big deal. So he stopped. And I know it's a children's story, but this still, if you really think about the lesson behind it, it's insane. The tortoise, what? He persevered the entire race. He ran the entire time, never stopped once, never even gave a thought about stopping. He kept running. The hare stopped, not just once, but a couple times. And then even one time, it says in the story what? He fell asleep. That's how fast, that's how much of a head start he thought he had on the tortoise. He's like, you know what? I can rest. There's nothing wrong with resting, but when you are putting in effort to get something done, right? If you decide to just take a nap and quit, and right in the middle of the work you're trying to get done, you are not taking responsibility for the work that you are doing. You are being lazy. But we all know how that story ends, right? The hare wakes up, the tortoise is at the finish line, he passes the finish line, and the tortoise loses. The hare loses, sorry. And he's surprised. He's like, why did I lose? And when you look at that story, you realize the reason he lost is because he did not put in the work. He stopped halfway, and he quit before getting to the finish line. If that rabbit, right, if he would have just went all the way and didn't even think twice, the tortoise would have never won. He would have destroyed that tortoise in the race, no problem, right? But that didn't happen. So history is filled with all this. So what counts is not how much a person starts, but how much he or she finishes. Jesus finished his task on earth. The words he spoke on the cross clearly indicate that he fulfilled an assignment, completed a task, and satisfied a requirement. They resonate with a deep sense of peace, and in fact, they confirm that he was not killed, but simply died. John 19:30 says, when he had received the drink, Jesus said, it is finished. And with that, he bowed his head and gave up the ghost. Because he had released and maximized his potential to successfully fulfill the purpose for which God has sent him into the world, Jesus saw death not as something to be feared, but as a natural step. In other words, Jesus went to the grave empty. This principle of finishing is also expressed very clearly by the Apostle Paul in his second letter to Timothy. For I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time has come for my departure. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my race. I have kept the faith. 2 Timothy 4:6-7. Paul faced death with a complete confidence and peace because he knew that he had fulfilled purpose for his life. When he spoke of being poured out, which suggests emptying some contents from oneself, he pointed to an accurate and important concept, but it must be understood by all who release their potential. You, like Paul and Lord Jesus Christ, were born for a purpose. The ability to fulfill the purpose that resides deep inside you, screaming to be released. Perhaps you yearn to write books, compose songs, scribe poetry, obtain an academic degree, paint on canvases, play music, open a business, serve in a political, civic, or spiritual organization, visit other countries, or even develop an invention of your own. Think how long you've carried your dream. Recall how many times you have postponed satisfying your desire. Count the many times you began to realize your goal only to quit. You know how many people have a dream that could truly make a difference? And very rarely do some of these people stand up to try and fulfill the thing that they much desire or they want to fulfill. You know, kids say stuff like, hey, I want to be this when I grow up, I want to be that when they grow up, and then as time goes on, that their idea of what they want to be starts to change, and then when they graduate, some people are like, I just want a job. That's all I need. I'm just trying to get a job so I can live on my own or get a life, have my own life or get an apartment, and that's just kind of how we go. And I would say there's nothing wrong if you don't end up going to college or getting a degree or whatever, but you always have to realize there's also those kids. When they grow up, they say, hey, I want to be a police officer. And you see that kid, same mentality all the way through high school. I want to be a police officer still when I graduate. I think that would be an awesome job. I want to serve people, right? I want to try to make a difference to the police force, right? They graduate, they go to the police academy, they do this, they go through that, and then guess what happens? From the beginning that they said they wanted to do something, the desire they had to want to be a police officer, they fulfilled it when they got older, right? If those kids can hold on to a dream for 20, 25 plus years, sometimes 30 years, maybe it takes a little bit longer for them to become a police officer, at least they went for their dream. But there are others that grow up and they start forgetting their desire and their dreams. They quit trying, right? But God did not intend that the cemetery would be the resting place of your potential. The grave, irresponsibility, taking your dreams and your visions and ideas and plans, right? To the grave is not part of God's design. You have a responsibility to release your potential. Join Jesus, Paul, and many others who rob death of pleasure and aborting their potential. You have to remember that the wealth of the cemetery is the potential of the unfinished. People that have left things in the grave, right? The death and the irresponsibility that they had when they just decided they didn't want to fulfill certain things, you can take that knowledge, right? And it kind of sounds bad, but you can take the knowledge of people who throughout history have tried to make a difference and take them, for example. You read throughout history, many wars and battles have been fought for land and this and that, or whether we fought for this or whether people set up for this, right? We have all sorts of different things that we have fought for as a world, right? That we have fought for here in America as well, that we try to make a difference. But in order for that to happen, someone had to stand up, take responsibility, and say, all right, I will be the person to make change, right? This knowledge that others have bestowed upon me, I will use it. Take responsibility to make a difference. So God designed everything not only to reproduce itself, but also to transfer and transmit its life and treasure to the next generation, right? You must consider a seed. Every seed comes into this world to deliver a tree, which in turn delivers more seeds, which produce more trees, and on it goes. All aspects of creation possess this generation principle. In the biblical record, God continually stresses the generational principle in all his dealings with man. He instructed Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply, right? He told Abraham that his seed would be great and bless the earth. He advised Moses to teach the people to pass on every law and experience to their children and their children's children. He also expressed it through Solomon in the words, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. Proverbs 13:22. That's why when I said the one time when you want to make a difference in your family's generation, if you are deciding that you're going to run a business or try to become wealthy, you want to be able to say, hey, if I were to, whatever happens to me, that the effort that I worked, the responsibility that I took, all the work that I decided to do, and everything that I went through, I wanted to be able to take care of my family's family. The generation after that, and the generation after that of my family. I want the things and the work that I've done to take care of not just one generation, but 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 generations down the road, so that my family never has to worry about the fact that, hey, we're struggling, right, with money or whatever the case may be. I want to make sure that I take responsibility when I get old enough and I'm learning and I'm getting experience and I'm trying to make my own path, right, along with God helping me and being my source and my guide, that I'll be able to leave something for my children's children's to inherit. The knowledge that I had, the wisdom that I had, the whatever it might be, the actions I made, the business that I have, whatever it's going to be, I wanted to take care of the future of my family, right? So if all the seeds in the world withheld the potential of the trees within them, a natural tragedy would be the result. The bees would suffer, the birds would die, and the animals would starve to death. Isn't that crazy? Trees not only help all of this, right? It helps us as well, because the genocide of man would also occur as oxygen disappeared from the atmosphere. All this would occur because one element, just one, in nature refused to fulfill the purpose for which it was created. God perfectly designed trees to be that factor that literally holds the whole earth together for all of us to live. Isn't that weird? The very thing that we cut down all the time I'm not like an activist or anything, you know what I mean? Like I understand I'm using paper right now. That's what I'm reading off of. Well, I'm not like an activist or nothing, but it doesn't mean we can't be mindful.
Right.
We cut down whole forests just for some paper and toilet paper, even, stuff like that. So like, I mean, there's got to be some other way that we can do stuff, because these are the things that help us to stay alive. If trees never fulfilled its purpose, we wouldn't have the oxygen in the atmosphere, right? And all these different creatures would also suffer as well, because they wouldn't have this natural source, right? We need it, right? We need it. And there's only so much that we can do sometimes to try and stop certain things from happening. I mean, we're in a generation of electronics. I still don't see why we use certain things sometimes. Like, But no man is born to live or die until himself. God gave you the wealth of your potential and your abilities, gifts and talents, energies, creativity, ideas, aspirations, and desires for the blessing of the future. Right? You use what you have presently to make a difference down the road. You bear the responsibility to activate, release, and deposit them. This generational principle of God, the Father of creation, is crucial to you, to your full appreciation of the principle of potential. Tragedy strikes whenever a person fails to die empty. So no man is born to live or die unto himself. So, how many hundreds of people, perhaps thousands or millions, were born or are yet to be born who need to benefit from the books you have neglected to write, the songs you have failed to compose, or the inventions you have continued to postpone? Perhaps there are millions you need the ministry you have yet to begin, the business venture you have not yet started. The next generation needs the treasure of your potential. So you must think of many inventions, books, songs, works of art, and great accomplishments others in the past generations have left for you. We must, like I said, we use history and understanding and knowledge of what others have done to further maximize everything, right? We went from, so if you look at the vehicles that we had in 1960 to 1999, so forth, you look at how different they were built. The understanding and the technology of how they were built. I had a guy that came up to the barber shop that I went and got my hair cut at yesterday. He had a 1955, like something, I don't remember what kind of vehicle it was, gorgeous and amazing condition, sounded pretty, but he's like, oh yeah, it was only designed to hold 10 gallons and gets 9 miles to a gallon. My car now has 10 gallons but holds 32 miles to a gallon. I can go 5 times the distance that he can in my car because we have furthered on in our invention. We have been able to figure out how to design cars to go much longer from much further at a much greater distance, right? Went from a 9 miles to a gallon vehicle with a huge engine in it to an engine that is still stable enough to go hours at a time without having to stop, right? Yeah. But there's a huge difference between how those cars are made and how these cars are made. The reason why these cars are more efficient now is they're not all made of metal, for one. It's very cheap metal. It's not designed super well, and that's why some of those cars didn't get very far mileage, right? Because it was designed to be heavier, right? But like I said, we took the past knowledge of the vehicles that we made, and we came up with something that is more efficiently useful now in our generation than it was then. Maybe back then, they weren't driving across the entire United States half the time. There weren't a lot of people driving that far, right? More often than not, sometimes I'm pretty sure they took like planes and stuff like that. But like, it wasn't as critically designed, right? So these ventures that we have, this knowledge that we have, right? These inventions that we're trying to make, these songs and poetries and all these books and hymnals, and all these different things that we are making now are all being made based off what we know, right? We learn from the past to create a future. The knowledge and the wisdom of others is implemented in our generations to learn to the next generation, to the next generation, to the next, right? We still don't have flying cars yet, though. Or actual floating cars. A lot of people thought in 2020 we were going to have floating cars. And then back in 2020, maybe 2022 we'll have floating cars. And we do have cars that are designed to fly and stuff like that. But it's not like a manufactured floating thing that everyone has, But you must not die unfinished and let the grave steal the gems of the future. Deliver your potential to inspire the children of the world. A word. So this is talking to the third world mind. History reveals the truth that any people who are robbed by oppression, suppression, depression, subjugation of the opportunity to activate, release, and maximize their potential suffer from the loss of generational thinking. Oppression forces them to think in terms of self-preservation and personal security with little thought to posterity in the future. More often than not, people who are oppressed will do what? They tend to be more selfish, right? They think about themselves more than others. They don't tend to really care about what other people are doing or the future of others. They just kind of do what benefits them. This mentality pervades many third world nations today, manifesting itself in an attitude and lifestyle that encourages immediate gratification at the expense of the future. So this mindset ultimately leads to fear, distrust, suspicion, and resentment among members of the same ethnic community. Huh. Interesting. So you're saying this oppression, basically, that we have caused others, even here in America or whatever we've done in other nations as well, what does it usually cause? People to take this self-preservation mentality to immediately want gratification over the expense of others, which leads to fear, distrust, suspicion, and resentment even among their own communities.
Generational dysfunction.
Sounds like a lot of what's going on in America right now. We are being very oppressive toward every culture, even our own.
Yes.
And because of this, it makes it very hard to trust each other, which is not a good thing, right? It's not a good thing. It doesn't matter what race you are. If you are deciding that you're going against your own culture, that is your first sign of you're not going to make no impact on no one else's culture, right? If I were to say, hey, I'm white, but I don't agree with this, or I hate my own civil, right? Or I hate my own people in a sense like that, or whatever, my own culture, I don't like it. You're already making the first step to making everyone think, oh no, that person probably doesn't care about any race then, right? Doesn't care about any race. But it doesn't matter, like I said, it doesn't matter what race you are, ethnic community you come from. If your mindset is already being forced into this self-deprivation or self-preservation mindset, right? You'll even go against your own community, which is not what we need to do. We as humans need to bond together. We need to work together. We need to trust each other, come together, not just a community but as individuals. But this lack of generational consciousness traps the individual in a cycle of self-maintenance and retards their creativity, inspiration, and innovation. Consequently, the release of tremendous abilities that lie within every individual is forfeited. So third world people everywhere must be delivered from this mentality. It is essential that they understand the responsibility that they have to their children and their children's children. So until a man can see beyond his own loins, the future is in danger. So until a man can see beyond his own family, his own self, his selfishness, until these people here in America, the cultural essence that we have, the people of different cultures and ethnic groups and all these different races, until they realize that they need to come together for a right purpose, for them, for their future, they're not going to make an impact in America. They're not going to make a difference in America. And that goes for every culture here. It goes for every culture in every country, no matter where you're at. even especially in third worlds, like it's saying, a lot of third world countries are very stuck in this preservation of, oh, we need immediate money and gratification so we can have this, take care of whatever. And it's like, that's not based off taking care of your future. It's based off preserving yourself. So the essence of potential is not preservation, but liberation. We must liberate ourselves from this mindset. We also, although we cannot change the past, we're not going to change the past. You know how many times people will bring up past history, especially here where we live, about different things that happen, right? They're like, oh, well, this happened and that happened, so, it's not going to change, you're always going to be the same. Or they bring up the same thing in other countries. Well, this happened in our history and this happened in our history, so we're going to forever be a third world country. No, you're only going to forever be a third world country because that's the mindset of your government. They don't believe they can be any better than what they are. So what? Because these people that are higher up get the immediate gratification of money and wealth and a nice place, they like to keep it that way. So no one else succeeds because they are preserving their position where they're at. It's the same thing for other places as well. I mean, this is mainly toward third world areas, but this doesn't have to only do with third world countries. This has to do with everyone. There are people here, especially too, who have grown up in families that they were very oppressed as a child. And when they get up, what happens usually? They don't trust the people in their family. They don't trust people around them. They tend to not make as many friends sometimes. And then what they really care about is self-preservation, right? They don't know how to go out of their way to be a friend to somebody else because in their mindset, they don't think anyone would actually care about them or what they're going to do or their future. But if you can take responsibility for who you are, then what? You can still find a way to make friends with people who feel the same way, who can help you to be encouraged. That's why us as Christians, we don't try to go outside of. A lot of people are super comfortable with trying to make friends within the church, and I don't think that's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to try to make friends within church. You want people around you with the same mindset who also think the same. But sometimes you need to take responsibility and go out of your way to find others as well who don't have the obligation or opportunity that you have in Christ, so that you can lead them to Christ as well, so they can feel this responsibility that Jesus placed upon us. So when they find Christ, what happens? Their dreams, their visions, their creativity, their intuitivity. I think I said that wrong. Intuitiveness can come out and be further expanded in what God wants for us, right? Those opportunities that we as Christians need to take. But the opportunity to blame others for the past is often before us, but we can never transfer responsibility for the future to others. We will take past things and make that our present. And then we don't make it the future, though. We'll take past grudges and still hold on to grudges, even though that has nothing to do with the present now. We'll take past failures and still hold on to those past failures, even though it has nothing to do with what you're doing now. Right? Where you're at now, what you're doing now is what matters. That's why I think it's so funny that people are like, well, how can you forgive someone that murdered someone who was in prison for blah, blah, blah so many years and they came out and now they got saved and set free and they believe in Christ? They're still a murderer? No. They were a murderer. But God released them from that sin. God released them from that problem they had in their past. They are no longer that person they were in the past because they had their life set free. They were saved. They changed. Their life has completely taken a whole nother turn, right? Who they are now is what matters. The past of people do not matter. We take the past knowledge in order to create future, but that does not mean we take the past knowledge to ruin our present. More often than not, that's what happens. We don't take responsibility for what we're doing now or what we're going to do in our future. Instead, we act like the past responsibilities that we failed to accomplish are what is going to determine what we're doing now, which is not true. You could lose your job yesterday, but it does not make you a failure today. does not mean you failed today. You can mess up with something, lose a relationship or whatever. Maybe you made a huge mistake in some way, shape, or form that happened just yesterday. But that does not mean that is you today. Every day is a new day, and every day is a new way to start something. And no matter what, if you set your mindset to say, this is a new day, this is a new way, this is what I'm going to do, and with God I'm going to make a difference, take responsibility, God can immediately say, oh, what happened 12, 15, 24 hours ago no longer matters now, because you decided at this very moment that you're going to make a difference, that you're going to take responsibility and make a change, right? You and I have been given by God all that we need to fulfill His purpose for our lives. We possess the ability to impact our homes, communities, our cities, our nations, and perhaps even the world if we dare to challenge ourselves and place demands on the vast wealth of potential buried within us. You must decide today to do something with your dreams, disappoint procrastination, and commit yourself to releasing your potential. You must stop wishing and start willing, and stop proposing and start purposing, stop procrastinating and start planning. Determined to die empty and leave the earth an inheritance that gives life to others. Remember, few things are impossible to diligence and skill. Great works are performed by what? Perseverance. Did Thomas Edison truly have the diligence and skill to create the light bulb? Not necessarily at first, but through perseverance and many failures, he did it. And that's the same thing throughout all of history. How many times has an inventor failed at making something, but because he persevered, it happened, right? Even these things. You know how much time it probably took when the first guy, right? You know how much effort he probably put in to try and make this, and it just kept not coming out the way he saw it, the way he wanted it, the dream that he had, the vision that he saw to make this phone. Yeah, it consumes most of our generation now, and it's a horrible thing. I'm not saying it's not. But it's still, with how future technology is, this is so helpful with my job. I do so much with my phone at my work that it helps in so many different ways. So I'm thankful for this design. I'm thankful for this invention. But you know how many times he probably failed before it finally came out the way he wanted? Diligence and skill only will take you so far. It's perseverance. I've seen athletes who are not as athletic as some of the most athletic people in the world, but because they put in the effort and they persevered and they were diligent in their work, right? They ended up having what? Stronger body, faster mentality, right? Outside the box thinking when it came to certain things, right? There are athletes who are not, when it comes to sprinting, like the 100-meter dash, right? In order for them to race or beat someone else, they realize maybe their physical limit is only at a certain point, but when they put in the effort consistently and they persevere and they do their workout routines and they practice over and over and over and over again, they realize they can get faster, stronger, better. And us as humans, we're getting faster, stronger, crazier sometimes, doing the most adventurous, wildest things. There are so many different things that the next generation and generation after that have tried. 10, 12 years ago, we wouldn't be having people doing all these insane stunts, right, that we're doing now. But now, at the point, or not, sorry, like 10, 12, 20 years ago, there are things that we're doing now that people wouldn't have even tried then. Because what? We have people that just their mindset is out of the box. They're like, hey, let's try this insane thing. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's try this. Let's try that. Right? Just recently in the Olympics, Shaun White, he didn't win the gold, but he's known as a legend because he invented his own move. He did this. He made a breakthrough through the snowboarding community for the insane tricks that he did and through the inspiration that he made. You know how many people looked up to him that were going against him in the past Olympics that lost to him or beat him? It's because he took the first step to try and make something different. He was the first person to ever do some crazy trick that he did, and people were like, oh my gosh, I've never seen anyone do that. That's insane.
Yeah.
And you know what happened after he invented that move? People did something crazier. People made up even crazier moves. Different skills were invented after that. Moves that no one even saw were done in this last Olympics that were insane. There were people that did the move that he created in the Olympics that he made that move. They did that twice in a row in the half pipe. What you do now when you're trying to make a difference, however you inspire, even if it's in a small group, you still inspire them to do something different with their life. So you can't procrastinate and just hold off on things. You must persevere through whatever work you're doing. Even if, like I said, even if you're at a job that you don't like, or you don't seem to find comfortable enough for you, or maybe it's not doing that much for you in your opinion, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to just quit to do something different. You must be patient to find an opportunity where your dream, your vision, whatever it might be, works, and then you move forward. But if you're going to move forward and do it though, you have to persevere. You have to put in the work, because if you don't, ultimately you're going to fail at the dream that you have because you did not put in the work or persevere. So the principles that I'm going to quickly go over. First one was the fact that you were born is evidence that you possess something that can benefit the world. Number 2 is God gave you the potential for the blessing of the future generations. Number 3, the greatest need of ability is responsibility. Number 4, God places demands on your potential by giving your ability responsibility. Number 5, fulfillment is directly related to the successful completion of a task. Number 6, God has given you everything you need to fulfill His purpose for your life. Everything that you need in order to fulfill your dream, your vision, the opportunity that you want, the business that you want to do, the invention that you're trying to make, the stories you want to write, the movies that you want to make, the songs you want to create, right? The art and the poetry, all of these things, the potential is there already in you. If that's your desire, if that's the dream you had, if that's the vision that you want to accomplish, God is giving you the ability to fulfill it already. It's there. So I'm going to go ahead and pray. Thank you everyone that's here, Lord, and for everyone that's watching. I pray that as we conclude this final chapter, that we take all this work, we take this potential, we take these lessons that we've gone through and the things that we've talked about, that we take all of it and we just take responsibility for the things that we have, the potential that we have, Lord, and we decide to walk out to this potential that we have, Lord, that we decide to take firm what you have given us and finally take responsibility for the have. If there are people watching right now and you feel like you haven't fulfilled something that God wants you to do, take hold of it right now and just grasp that and move on. Do what God wants you to do. Pray to God and ask Him, God, give me the wisdom to do the thing that you gave me a vision for 20, 30, maybe 15, maybe it was recent, maybe it was 2 weeks ago. I pray that God gives you this vision and that you just